Would it be fair to call you one of NBA Twitter's biggest villains?
Yeah, that's probably fair. It's not intentional. I like Dr. Doom. I'm more of a nation state. I just act in my own self-interest and the interest of truth and justice. I think I personally am not the hero that you deserve, but the hero you need. But that's not for me to decide. Your intro music is amazing. That is, I have done so many of these shows. You have, like, I do so many of these shows. That is the best intro music I have heard, hands down.
I'm appreciative of that. That's the first time I used that one since I started using music in
That's
the intro.
the one. That is the most. That is also the most you intro music that you can hear, that you can possibly imagine. Like, that is absolutely you.
Yes, boom bap in your face. I have a story about how I got at least that first beat, but we can't get into it. Joining me is Matt Moore. We're on live here.
Did you hurt someone?
No. It's just an old tale. Like, yeah, it's just it'll take too long.
No extortion. Like,
yeah. No. Everything's super legal over here. Joining me is Matt
Sounds
Moore.
like it. Like, that's absolutely what someone that definitely did not threaten someone. They didn't give them the beat that they wanted. That's what they would say is super legal. That was good.
Like, at HP Basketball, I will get this intro out. At HP Basketball, that is on Twitter, that is on BlueSky. He has Substack. He has obviously Action Network, where we do buckets on Thursdays, and he does buckets seemingly every day, including a fill-in last week because you got pissed at Sean Little for botching your day off, which we won't bring up beyond me just bringing it up. But we're going to talk about the trade deadline predominantly here because, I mean, I'm very invested into the trade deadline just as someone who not just covers the league, but also just as a consumer of the league.
Yeah.
And the trade deadline is very fun. You're more plugged in than I am for sure. And we just want to hit sort of all the different points, but we want to start with this. Is the trade deadline going to matter this year? Because it feels like a lot of people are scared that we're not going to have the noise, the fireworks that we typically do. And we've had, I just looked this up before we got on, at least 10 trades, every trade deadline since 2017. So that's almost a decade where there's been activity. Now, not always super memorable activity, but there's been activity. And it feels like this year, the CBA may ruin the fun for all of us, Matt.
Yeah, so I think it's like there will be deals, but they're not going to be, I'm not going to say they're not going to be earthquake moves, because I think it's possible you get one big one. And what I mean by that is you have these teams, and if it's like, okay, we can't trade with anybody that doesn't have a big enough salary slot to take this money. So they got to have a slot this big. So we need to involve multiple teams to get home on this deal. And like, the easy one is Jimmy, but also like I'm open to the idea of that evolving outside of Jimmy, because that's happened before where it's like two teams worked with a third team because that third team was trying to move a guy and they couldn't get it done. But the two other teams were like, well, we like what we're giving each other. Why don't we go find somebody else to do the rest of the deal? And that's how those things evolve. And when you have Beal at 50 and you have Jimmy at 48, like that's got to go somewhere, right? And the answer might be that nobody's willing to take him, and that especially with Beal being like, you are not sending me to Siberia. I am not going to get pushed out here. You can bench me. You can do whatever.
Right.
I'm not going to wherever, like, I guess trying to think of like what hell is, but like wherever that is for Bradley Beal, he may not want to go there. The key though is there are teams that I don't think are like, oh no, we're good. That's the difference. Is I think fans are like, well, they're winning games, so they got to be good. Like they're good. No, that's because teams are always either way more nervous when they have a good record or way more excited when they have a good record and are like, we're good, but what if? And so I always say this, the GMs act more out of opportunity than they do out of desperation. When it's like, you got to move this guy. They got to move him. Most teams are like, no, we actually don't. Like, it's fine. Like, we'll figure it out later. We'll either do a sign and trade or something else. And I think the Heat are going to try that. I don't think it's going to be the case with Miami because they're not dealing with a stable element. Like, it's fine to do that when it's like, we'll find a place for you later, sir. It's a different thing when you have that kind of nuclear radioactive element in your locker room.
Yes.
But what I do think is there's a difference. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, the Bucks are going to trade so-and-so. Do I think that the Bucks have had conversations about bigger deals than you would think? Yes. That's like the indication I've been giving people outside Milwaukee. It's not coming from inside Milwaukee. That's the impression that I get.
Yeah.
The Bulls are not like, wow, we're pretty good. Let's just keep it all together and let's keep it rolling. No, like they are like, we gotta get rid of this money. We gotta get rid of this money now. And so they are still gonna be looking to move Vucevic, which is a big salary slot, and LaVine, which is a big salary spot. Now the problem is the teams that want to move the large contracts don't want to take anything back, and that's where this thing is going to get messy and ugly and complicated, and things may fall apart because like Chicago and Denver, as far as I can tell, were like, hey, how about? And the other side was like, yeah, I think so. What if we do this? Yeah, that sounds good. And then the Nuggets were like, and you could take Zeke Naji. And the Bulls were like, have a nice day. And like, that was it, right? But as they return to those conversations, because if you have something where it's like, we like this guy and we're willing to give you this guy, then you can work it out as you figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that there are enough pieces in play that's something, and this is the possibility of there being something out of left field. The other thing to do as you're watching the trade, this is one of my favorite things about trade deadline stuff. When you hear that a team is looking to deal a player where you're like, oh, like that makes sense. Look at the other guys that they might be willing to move. Because this happened last year very specifically with the Washington Wizards. They had conversations with like 17 teams about Kyle Kuzma. And then they flipped it around and were like, Daniel Gafford, whoop, out the door. Like that's how this goes. Similar thing with the Charlotte Hornets, where they had conversations about moving other guys. Miles Bridges, whoop, PJ Washington, out the door. Where it's like you work on one deal and that almost acts as like a feint for you to agree to terms on another deal later. So just some things to kind of keep in mind. Do I think that this trade deadline is going to be awesome with like 15 teams? No, because again, the second apron is a disaster. It might crush it. I'm not going to rule it out, Bryan, that this could just like crush the trade market. That's in part what it was designed to do because the owners are diabolical. But I do think that there's enough of it. But the counterpoint to the owners are diabolical and don't want guys moving deals is also the owners wanted a reason to give them the excuse not to pay the tax, not to go in the second apron tax.
Right.
And so that's a reason for them to just be like, hey, you've got salary space. Let's move it on out of here. There's not enough teams to do it. And Detroit, the biggest problem, last thing, is Detroit going off the board as what I call a money launderer. Like the Hornets are a money launderer this year, where they're just like, yep, absolutely. We will take your trash. We'll give you a valuable player out as long as you give us the draft assets.
Sure.
Keep it coming. We're aiming for Cooper Flag. Cool.
Sure. Yep.
Detroit had positioned themselves preseason and had told teams, hey, we're going to try and win a little bit this season. We think we're going to be better, but like, we're still very open if you want to call and we'll talk about those deals. Now they're like, we're actually good. So we're kind of shifting. We don't really want to do that. Like, we don't want to take your big contracts anymore. Yeah. And that takes one of those partners off the table, which is very significant.
Okay. Couple things. I will throw at you some trade deadline stuff from last year, perhaps the year before, because there have been some active trade deadlines that might get nuked, but want to put that into a little bit of historical context. Also, if you're watching, thank you. I see some comments. We are going to get to those after a couple more minutes here, but we will get to them. So if you have comments, please bring them, and all comments are welcome, except obviously, dickhead ones. So last year, there were 15 deals, Matt, in the trade deadline, around 20 teams involved. Okay, 2/3 of the league. The big ones were probably the Dallas trades with Daniel Gafford, with PJ Washington. There was a Bojan Bogdanovic trade that a lot of people forget about, obviously, and the Knicks ended up turning that into getting Mikal Bridges. So that was kind of the move before the move. There was some movement. There were a lot of smaller deals also involving like Patrick Beverley, for example, but those were sort of the signature trades. The year before was Kevin Durant going from the Nets to the Suns for the Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson package. Cameron Johnson actually could be part of this again this year. We'll see. But the Nets obviously have some motivation to move a good player to try to get something back, because Cooper Flag and also other players in the draft. Like, I'm probably higher than most on VJ Edgecombe, for example, when he's somebody like if I'm in the top 3, top 4, top 5, and I get him as a constellation, I'm thrilled with that because I think he's going to be very, very good. And the year before that, one of my absolute favorite trades, not the James Harden for Ben Simmons one, because that was in 2022, but also this year. I was at Basketball News, RIP. I was at Basketball News at the time. We were doing a live trade deadline stream, and I reacted live to Kristaps Porzingis being traded for Davis Bertans and Spencer Dinwiddie. And I've been memed by Alex Kennedy and Sean Rochester and other people since that. So you can go find that. But yeah, that was a trade that like was right before the deadline actually ended. That absolutely stunned me. So sometimes you get trades like that. It also gives you an idea of what Porzingis was worth at the time. 21 Alex comments Kyrie. Kyrie was a few days before the trade deadline when he did get moved to the Nets, or from the Nets rather to the Mavs. But that's another one also. And we haven't had that flurry of activity yet. I don't think teams are going to sit on their hands willingly. I think if anything, it'll probably be by force, as you were alluding to.
Like they'll they're having all these conversations. They're trying to work stuff out, but there is like a whole real holdup in terms of like somebody's got to take the money, because these teams, like the teams that would be buyers for, hey, we'll give you X amount and we'll take back X plus Y in money because we're closer to a championship contender and you get to save a little bit. Those deals are gone because now the championship contenders are like, if we don't get out of the second apron, we can't sign buyout guys. We can't aggregate deals and trades this summer. Like we got to get, and we need to do some of this work, soon. But there's also, there has been a move to like, we'll just rearrange everything in the summer and then play through the year and then rearrange everything in the summer. I don't know how you can look at the Mavericks last year and be like, we should just sit tight. I would just be like, no, man, like we're in an era of parity. We're in an era where 7 seeds, 8 seeds, 5 seeds, 6 seeds have made the conference finals in the last 2 seasons. And that's continued to be a trend in that direction, is that there is upward mobility in this parity era for you to be able to make a real run to a conference finals or finals appearance. And while those teams have not been successful in winning the title, as we've continued to hold, if you're not a top 3 seed, you do not win the NBA title. All it takes is like the breaks going your way, one injury. And it's like, it may not be fair to the fairest thing in the world, but nobody's going to take that banner away from you. So I would still be looking. And I will say there's teams out there. A good example of this is the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Both of those teams are active in trying to add another wing. When it's like, God, they're so good. They're at the top of the league. They're on pace for 70 games. Both of those teams are making active calls trying to upgrade their wing spots.
Not the one in Miami, though.
Not the one in Miami.
Not the one in Miami. Okay. Speaking of Miami, Callum has a question. Best outcome for Miami. You have Jimmy's quote unquote people, he says, claiming the Heat have had good offers, parentheses, doubt it, or parenthetically doubt it. Just wondering where the situation goes as he is back versus the Nuggets, who, Matt, you cover on Locked On Nuggets. I failed to mention at the top, Locked On Nuggets, Locked On NBA, so many things. But they play the Nuggets Friday, and the suspension is almost up. It's kind of time. I thought when this started, Matt, that Jimmy would be moved during this period. Now I'm kind of off that, though I still think he could be moved, but it's just extremely difficult to what we were saying earlier. Like, honestly, it sucks to be a casual NBA fan, right? Like this year. Not sucks like from a standpoint of like, it's awful and the league is awful, but it's getting harder to follow, I think, if you're a casual NBA fan. And I'm getting a lot of my casual NBA fan friends being like, yo, there's like, I don't understand the CBA. There's too many threes. I don't have time for this shit. Like, wake me up in the playoffs. Yeah. But to answer Callum's point, what do you think? What do you have on this?
Okay, so I think this is really funny. The timing is always what you need to piece together. Okay, so I think it was Friday when the report came out. Hey, Heat are just going to let him back in.
Yeah.
His suspension will be lifted. They're more than fine with him coming back.
They're reportedly open to that. Yeah.
Totally open. He can come in and play. We're not going to give him the money and we're not going to trade him, but he can come on up, come back. Love to have him in the locker room. And then Tuesday, Chris Haynes goes on the spinometer and then drops this like list of grievances, including like I was on 5 reasons with Ethan, and he was telling me something about, because like I hadn't even read through it yet, because honestly I'm kind of like hand motion at it, but like,
yeah,
oh, he didn't get one paycheck last year because of an HR dispute. Are you kidding? Are you kidding me?
The people who may have missed that allegedly one of his payments was delayed by like 10 days because of some sort of like an HR mishap or whatever the case may be. Happens in business.
Power bill was almost turned off. Whew! Man, I might have had to throw out the groceries in the fridge if they hadn't gotten that straightened out.
Right.
Complaining about like I had to do media after the trade the reports came out.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? But like think about the timing, right?
Yeah.
This is don't listen. This is not Jimmy trying to get you on his side. It's a declaration from Jimmy Butler of I'm still mad. I'm not over it. I want out. Make it happen. You have 3 days. And the Heat being like, well, we're not worried. It'll be fine. And covering themselves from another grievance.
Sure.
And so, like, the end point, here's this really weird. I think Pat Riley is the one organization you don't want to go up against. The only point I kind of have is, like, you got to be, like, you have to be so petty about this. Because there is a point where it doesn't become worth it. Like, just move on with your organization. Because it's also unfair. Like, this is what I always think in this trade stuff. What about the other guys? Bam Adebayo is one of the best players in the league, and his season is getting derailed by this nonsense.
He looks absolutely tired. Like, just watching him play, he looks fried.
Tyler Hero is having one of the best seasons in the league in terms of a guy popping onto the scene, most improved player candidate. He's been the best player on Miami. He's been sensational. Jaime Jaquez needs to get his game back on track. Yes. Nikola Jovic needs to keep doing whatever it is that leads his advanced metrics to look so good. When I look at the box score and I'm like, what did he do?
Yeah.
But
except for last night,
they need that stuff. Like, and you just need to get on with basketball life.
Yes.
And so while I admire their, like, we have standards here. If you didn't want this, if you didn't want the situation, and I was talking to Ethan about this, like, there were rumors a year ago they weren't going to give him the extension. There were rumors a year ago before the deadline.
Yeah.
Before the deadline. And they could have moved under cover of night and been like, whoop, moved him out, got a new core in. Hey, we're still contending. We wish Jimmy Butler the best, but we don't feel it's in our best interest to give him the extension. And fans would have been mad, but they would have gotten over it when they had a better team on the floor to start this season. This summer, hey, couldn't reach an extension. That sucks. We moved on once we realized we couldn't do a deal. Fresh start, move on. Now you're in the middle. And that's where this gets really gross and hard to figure out. How, like, everyone's stuck. Coaches, staff, players, agents. Everybody's stuck in the middle. Like, if you're the Heat and you're like, well, we'd like to add, X, Y, and Z to the roster, you can't even look at deals because you've got this thing you have to figure out first. And you don't know whether you're going to be, like, you can't add another 2-guard, even if you could find a deal, because you don't know if Jimmy Butler is going to be on the team next year. Like, what if he just resolves this? And so I don't think he's going to be, but I'm just saying it is in everybody's best interest to move on. But Butler, with this, with all the stuff that came out today, that is him signaling, no, you're not, like, I'm not just going back to work.
Do you think, two things? One, do you think for the good of the locker room, this absolutely has to happen now? Like, they need to do the Jimmy Butler deal ASAP? And two, do you think there's actually going to be a Jimmy Butler deal between now and the trade deadline, which is slightly over 3 weeks away as the time we're recording this?
I mean, look, the thing is, like, I'm not going to sit here and try and predict what Riley's going to do. I would think that Andy Ellsberg and Adam Simon are probably looking towards what is the best option for us long-term. And Van's got a good comment in there about the 2026 free agency thing, which that really conversation, I think, started.
Van Lee says, I'll read it here. Bryan and Matt, I think the Miami front office is selling their fans a 2026 dream. More teams will start doing that. They are not getting Luka or Fox in free agency. Crying emoji. I see Luka moving to Colorado with his best buddy before Miami. I mean, you could probably speak to that last point. But
I'm not even going to go there. But what I will say is, George Sedano kind of started talking about over on 5 Reasons about how like free agency is going to make a comeback. And there has been like a little bit of this conversation around the league.
I agree with him, by the way.
Once these contracts run out and the contracts stabilize to the current CBA,
yes,
and the structure stabilize, then you'll see more cap space and the ability to do that.
Yes.
But without an amnesty provision in these, like that's one of the things that was missing, right? The last time that we had a major change to the CBA structure, there was an amnesty clause included. And there's been no amnesty clause included in the CBA. And that's one of the reasons. Like, how quickly would the Suns just be like, I mean, we're going to amnesty Beal and we'll absorb Jimmy Butler in the cap space for whatever other guys they would do whatever they needed to get it. And it may not be enough, right? They may not be enough for Miami. That's what I think is tough here, is that because Miami still, the biggest thing is that Miami has signaled basically, we want to be competitive. Okay. So you want players? Well, we don't want any big contracts. Okay. But you
literally can't do that.
You can't get good players that don't make any money. Like, it's not allowed. It's literally not allowed in this. So that's like, that to me is the holdup here. But, ultimately, look, if you want my prediction, crystal balling, is that
sure,
Jimmy comes back on Friday, they get dismantled, everything is bad.
Is he quiet quitting on Friday?
He refuses to talk to the media on the first night. He says something again explosive the next time he does media, and like this just keeps going.
6 points on 3 of 11 shooting, no free throws.
But my role, I can't believe my role in this offense. And like
Tyler Hero has another 25, 10, and 7.
And like, look, just between us, friends, I'll just say Miami fans deserve every single bit of this for how they acted over the Dame stuff. And
the organization?
No, Miami fans, not the organization, just the fans and the media. So, because I think the organization, honestly,
this is why some of them want to kick your ass.
Yeah,
this is exactly why.
The organization, I don't think actually. That's the funny part is I think Cronin and the organization are fine. I think they are fine. I think Miami is like, we really wish you would have engaged us, and Cronin's like, well, I didn't. It's like, all right, well, anyway. So, what do you want for Robert Williams? Like, you just move on.
Yeah. I want to get to some more comments here. There's another one here, and I actually want to pivot to Zion a little bit here. But the official high vote says trade Jimmy for Zion. I don't think that's going to happen. I have a hard time seeing.
We're really mad because Jimmy Butler keeps missing games and isn't available.
That's exactly it.
And then Pat Riley in his postseason press conference comes out with a diagram and just points out everything wrong with Zion's body and why he needs to fix it.
Yes, I want to get to 21. Alex and Rodolfo also have comments that I want to get to. So let's do the Zion thing actually right now.
All right.
Like there's been talk about him potentially being on the market, quote unquote. Is he actually? Because if you look through the contract, people should know this. If you look through the contract, there's some outs. Like, it's not as daunting of a salary to take in as you may think. There are some outs, but you still have to take on Zion Williamson, who, speaking of players who have negative reports about them, Zion Williamson allegedly like being late to multiple things. He had suspended one game after he just came back from injury, and injuries have hampered his career like some of us probably expected because, I mean, look at him. No offense. And like, it's more of a body composition thing because moving that way at that size, I have the same concerns with Victor Wembanyama, who's built totally differently, but that's another story for another day. With Zion Williamson, where are we at with him? Is he going to get moved? Is there actually a market? New Orleans doesn't seem like a Jimmy Butler suitor at all. And I don't see Pat Riley being like, hey, yeah, I'm going to take one game-to-game injury risk for another. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, I don't know how he fits with Bam and Ware and Hero,
I don't think that this isn't me making a joke. I'm serious. I don't think he embodies Heat culture. Like, there is a certain level of professionalism, and sometimes they get guys that are on the edges in random deals or in signings because they like the talent and they're like, you have to meet this expectation or you won't play. But if like the major deals that they're going to do, they're going to bring in guys that they believe embody that culture. And I don't think Zion does. I don't think you can look at this from any perspective and be like, yeah, we believe that Zion does. So
Does anybody?
Instead, well, that's tough. Instead, here's what I could see is if you're a team that can easily take on the contract and then, if necessary, liquidate it using the provision, right? And I'm not privy to all the contract details on Zion, so if he's traded, if that transfers, I'm gonna assume it does. This is a hypothetical. This is like me just like speculating, not based off of anything I've heard. But if you look at Zion goes to Charlotte pieces go to Miami. If you're the Pelicans and you get extra of trade assets out of it, is absorbing Beal the worst thing in the world?
Charlotte, by the way, in terms of money that you need to make work, Miles Bridges is probably top of that list, 27, 25, 23. So that's descending. The only thing is salary on the books for 2026, 27. Now you can try to take it, pivot, get out of it before then. So it's not a big deal. And also Grant Williams, who has a torn ACL, 13, 13-6, 14-2. Josh Green, 12-6, 13-7, 14-7. And like those are probably three that would get consideration for this.
And like that's like a very interesting fit, right? LaMelo with Zion, with Brandon Miller. You have a big three. Zion with the connections to North Carolina. Like
big three's doing a lot of work there.
There's stuff there that you can kind of buy into. The only reason I don't think it's likely is that Charlotte, I know, not for a fact, I am very confident Charlotte got Zion Williamson's medicals before the 2023 NBA draft and decided not to do a deal for the number 2 pick. Now, that may have just been like Michael Jordan was like, screw you, we're taking Brandon Miller. That's it. That is like the most likely scenario. But also like, I don't know what the impacts of seeing the medicals were. I just don't.
Also, good pick, by the way. Like on paper, good pick for Charlotte. Like good choice getting Brandon Miller.
So there's those kind of options. Somebody mentioned Brandon Ingram in the chat too.
Yes,
to Miami.
Let's pull that up. That's Callum expiring.
Again, like that's not a bad idea. Where if you go, okay, Ingram goes out to Miami.
They've liked them in the past, by the way. Like that's an important detail.
And like I think he's a Heat culture guy. As much as I don't like Brandon's game, I think he's a Heat culture guy. So like Brandon goes to Miami, Butler goes to Phoenix,
Beal
to either New Orleans or somewhere else, and the extra assets go to New Orleans.
Yes.
Like that's the structure that we're kind of like looking at, where you need to find a team that's willing to kind of do those kind of things. That's got and New Orleans is one of the reasons that they've got to be in these talks is they've got Zion, who can be a waivable contract, and Brandon, who can be who's an expiring. And that combo of large money is very rare because like Charlotte can help you, but Charlotte's going to have to be like, all right, here's throwing Bridges on the pile, here's Grant Williams, and then like I got one of the Martin guys, you like the Martin guys, and then like and just like chucking in pieces to try and make the deal work. Versus New Orleans can be like, here are big chunks that we'll send out. Chicago, we got Vucevic and we've got LaVine. So if you can find a way to move the pieces and get us out of the money, we'll help you move that money. And then the question, like from there, but that's what's interesting about that is that opens up the possibility of, it's always easier to do these like 2-team trades, obviously, right? Like it's just easier to get it done. It's not just because of the complexity, it's that there's so much, you have to have so much trust in the other owners. And that's really where things fall apart. There's so many times when GMs have had a deal in place and the owner has just come in and been like, I changed my mind. No. And then you've already contacted the guys and been like, hey, you probably need to start packing. And then you look like a dip. So there's all these kind of things that you have to watch out for. And there's just like mistrust because everybody's competing against each other. But my point here is, if you start moving the pieces around and Golden State doesn't have to take back Jimmy Butler or Brandon or Bradley Beal, but there are other pieces, now Golden State's like, okay, now we're interested. Like we're open to a deal. We just didn't want either of those guys. We can help you. We've got assets we're willing to move and we want to make a trade. We just didn't want any of those pieces. And so you can kind of start adding these things in, and it does get too complicated. And then those things will often fall apart. Like 3-teamers even fall apart, I think, more often than anything.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's potential for those type of deals, specifically because of the environment that we're working in, where it's like, you want to move a big contract, we want to move a big contract. They've got space and have expirings. Let's figure out how to do this. Because Chicago might honestly be like, yeah, we'll trade you, we'll do this deal and help out, and we'll take Brandon Ingram because we just want to clear the cap space. We just want off the money. And that might be what they do. So
We got a
I do
comment
think
about
that
the Bulls that I'm going to get to in a second also.
let's do it.
Yeah. Just to close the loop on Zion first. The money is this year 36.7, 39.4 the year after, in 2026, 27, 42 point about 2, and then 44.9 that final year. However, next year, 2025, 2026 season, non-guaranteed. It becomes fully guaranteed if he's on the roster. July 15th, this is from Spotrac, July 15th, 2025. The year after, it's the same thing. Non-guaranteed becomes fully guaranteed July 15th. The year after, the same thing. Non-guaranteed becomes fully guaranteed July 15th. And then there's some other sort of triggers and clauses and protections and things of that nature. Weight must be less than 295 pounds, body fat monitored, injury sustained to right foot. There's a note there. Other injuries as well. So, yeah, there are outs on the Zion contract, but you're still, I don't think you're getting him for nothing, regardless of who you are. Like, that's the other thing. But Charlotte is one team for me. Like, I can see it. Because I think Charlotte, I was a year early on them, as you said. I think next year they could be like maybe Pistons-ish, hopefully.
I mean, a lot is there are problems. They got to get the culture right by the end of the year, because I think that they've gone a little bit backwards. And some of that is just like as simple as I just think that in the absence of good wins, like LaMelo's doing this stuff, and I'm just like, this isn't the way, man. I get you're frustrated. This is not how you should be doing it. Like, I get it. I get it. I understand. Like, you're gonna make an all-star team, and that's great, and you're putting up good numbers and getting your name out there, and that's good. This is not the way to do this. Like, this is not how you want your career to get turned. You don't want this identity, but
yeah,
he's doing what he's doing.
Vanley says, Matt Moore, love your work, my guy. You give me a mix of Nikola Jovic's uncle and Louis Litt from Suits. You are hilarious in the spreadsheet NBA world we live in. Do you take this as a compliment, a backhanded compliment, or a straight up diss?
I mean, it's absolutely a backhanded compliment. No one's ever like, you know who I want to be? I want to be Louis Litt. Like, no one's ever like that. Like, ever. No one is ever like, you know what I want to be is I want to be like Louis Litt. That's not what I want. So, you know, fine. I appreciate the love, my man. Thanks for absorbing the content. I've kind of been talking about this a lot lately on various platforms.
Yes.
Some people are made to be loved, some people are made to be hated, but as long as the engagement comes, the check cashes, and that's what I'm here for. So
Vanley follows up. And I want to pivot to LaVine because, well, I put him on the graphic, but also he's somebody who maybe he gets traded, maybe he doesn't. His contract, not the easiest to move. Chicago's trying to figure some things out. Vucevic has been in talks, but Vanley says Miami needs to take LaVine and run. I hard disagree with Vanley, who I like because, you know, I've seen his comments, we've spoken, things like that. I do not want Zach LaVine. If I'm Miami specifically, if I'm another team, maybe. But
yeah, I mean, so the whole problem here is just, again, that front offices are simultaneously cowardly and high on their own supply. And that's like overly critical, because I have like so much respect for Andy Ellsberg and Adam Simon and that crew. Like, the Heat guys are so smart, and they approach things, like everything they do, I'm so impressed with.
Too smart for their own good, I would probably say sometimes.
However, like, this is one of the things is just like, do you want to this is? It's a galaxy brain move. The move right now is to trade Tyler Hero.
There it is.
Like,
is this a Brandon Anderson would eat this up?
It's just such a great opportunity to be like, we're cashing in on this really good asset. Go get you a guy that you're just like, it is absolutely this dude, right? You can't get Amen Thompson, but maybe there's like a guy that you can get that where you're like, it's this guy. And we'll give you Tyler Hero and whatever assets we pick up from the Jimmy trade. and you ask them like, what do you want? Right. And then you try and make that deal, and you do a deal in pursuit of that. But to me, like, that's the way to go here. It's not that I don't think that Tyler is good. Tyler's been so great this year. Shot selection has been better. He's been a leader. He's made clutch shots. Like, I have nothing but respect. Honestly, like, that's the thing. As much as I have criticized Hero in the past for like his game and his impact, I have so much respect for the player that Tyler has come out of the other side of this fire for, because in the middle of this nonsense and after years of being included in trade talks, and understandably so, but having to deal with those rumors, Tyler just goes out there and does his job. He gets it. He goes out there, he does his job, he tries to lead. This is a year where everybody could have just disconnected and been like in a funk. Tyler's been like, no, like I'm going to get mine, because me getting mine is the best way for us to win. And he's right, because they need it. It's very rare that I'm like, I want to see a guy play that way and not, be more of an impact, share the ball type of guy. But Tyler's doing exactly what they need, and it's been phenomenal. But on the other end of this is just like, yeah, but like you could sell high on Tyler Hero right now. So I would just be like, trade Jimmy, trade Tyler, and revamp the entire team around Jaquez, Jovic, Bam, and whatever else you can get, and then open your cap space up to add another star down the line.
Oh boy. Tired, trade Jimmy Butler. Wired, trade Tyler Hero. Inspired, trade both. This is basically what Matt is saying. Tyler's $29 million, then 31, then 33. A contract that's actually aging pretty well considering the season he's having. And I'm somebody who, like, I've been saying that they should probably move him for a while now. And now I'm kind of like, all right, they're clearly not going to. He's going to be a building block. But your point is interesting. I just don't think that they're going to do it. So I'm not even gonna come back at you with that one. Rodolfo Dunin, probably Dunin. You can correct me in the comments, please do. What kind of offers is Miami seeing from the Suns? And follows up with, our Suns including future firsts and Ryan Dunn in Heat offers?
No, I mean, no.
They're not.
So, I have to look. My understanding is that if you want the Suns first rounders, you're talking to the wrong team and you need to go to Houston. They just don't have anything left. They mortgage almost everything. They might be in the same situation as Denver, where they've got 2031, but I don't have that like up in front of my face right now. But most of their picks are owed, and so they don't have draft compensation to send back to you. Ryan Dunn, there's no way that they're going to give you, because Dunn is, there's no reason to. And if you want to know why, it's the same reason that every Heat fan was like, we can't give up Jovic in the Dame deal. We're going to give up Tyler Hero and like this coral garbage we found at the bottom of the ocean. And we're going to get Dame because he wants to come here. Like, you're facing the same kind of situation where it's like, well, look, only worse, because Dame was never going to make it that bad for the Bucks or for the Blazers. He was like a little grumpy on media day, and that was as bad as it got. Jimmy Butler nuked your locker room. Like, it's an entirely different deal. And by that token, also, just like, I don't think that Phoenix is like, those contracts are so valuable now. Like, that's the other part of this is the guys on rookie deals that are cost controlled are so valuable that it's very hard to get those. And Dunn's really good. So there's zero chance that you're going to get. And if you're asking like, well, then what's Miami going to get? Like, that's a really good question. And that's why I think that they're having a hard time doing the deal. I think it's why they haven't pulled the trigger. I think they want to move on, but I think that like, this is the reality that they're facing. Again, if we're in the old CBA, someone would have been like, yeah, we can do this. Yeah, for sure. Jimmy, I don't care. Jimmy in the playoffs, give me that. Well, we will risk it for that. But now it's not the same equation. And so now you're seeing like a big shift there. As far as like what the Suns are like, the Suns are basically, they are hoping to find someone to take Beal, and that the assets that they trade into the team that takes Beal for are good enough for Miami to accept the offer. And that's why
they need Beal to say yes. And they need Beal to say yes. That's the important thing.
Yes.
Bradley Beal basically like holds all the cards. The trade deadline, like the excitement of the trade deadline basically is in Bradley Beal's hands, which is a frightening proposition. But that's kind of where we're at this point, because the single biggest name that could be moved to Jimmy Butler's second is probably Bradley Beal. And Bradley Beal could just say no to any trade he wants. Like,
that's the thing. So you have to find a team that he wants to go to that wants him, and that's like,
Would the Wizards take him back?
I don't think so. I think it's possible, but I don't like, I'm not ruling it out, in part just because, like, if you're like, why would the Wizards want that money? Well, the Wizards have a $200 million payroll this season. Why do you like, what is that about?
They want to move off Jonas Valanciunas. They've been open
Poole.
reportedly to moving Kuzma, like
Poole.
Jordan Poole also.
I think that probably Kispert's gettable as a sweetener
That's
too.
interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, like you can. I mean, that's possible. The other one, if it was, there's just no way to do it because of the second apron. Like the Lakers are an easy one, where it's just like, yeah, just cobble together enough contracts and get it done, and the Lakers will be like, sure, we'll have Bradley Beal, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and who cares who else we get? We'll scrap Max Christie, Bronny. It's fine. That's like the way it used to work, but they literally can't make it work. Like they literally can't do it because of second apron rules. So it's just like not doable for them.
And the salaries they have don't quite get there because
Right.
Murray's in the teens, Gabe Vincent's in the teens, Jared Vanderbilt's in the teens, and you're still several $1 million off.
Right. Brooklyn coming out through Mark Stein and saying they're not interested was, I think, a big blow to Jimmy. Again, if we look at like the timeline, Mark Stein reports on Sunday that the Brooklyn Nets are not interested in Jimmy Butler through trade or free agency. On Tuesday, Haynes drops this. It's not a coincidence. Like that's a Miami being like, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And because that's been Miami's position from the start is, if you want to go somewhere, you're going to need our help. Like you're going to, even if you want to sign somewhere this summer, nobody's got cap space you want to go to. So we have to agree to a sign in trade. And Jimmy is definitely like, you will do what I want.
As someone who covered the Nets and the first iteration of the Sean Marks era over there, I'd be stunned to learn that it wasn't Sean Marks or his side who gave that to Mark Stein. I don't see Jimmy Butler being a Sean Marks move.
And what I think is interesting there, and the reason that a couple of us, we absolutely like Mark Stein's a Hall of Famer.
Yes.
He knows way more about the stuff than I do. Way more about the stuff than I do.
Same.
But my question is, if you're right and that's Sean Marks, what does Josiah think? Because that's always my thing is I have a lot of faith in Sean Marks to build a really good roster and handle this rebuild and do it correctly.
He's done it already.
I have zero faith in Josiah not to be like, yeah, but like we could get Jimmy Butler.
He had to have learned something from I know billionaires, they don't learn as much as people think. But at the same time,
you're saying this at the same time that Matt Ishbia, after what has happened with the Phoenix Suns, is like, I know.
Slightly different because he looks at Bradley Beal, looks at Jimmy Butler, and it's probably like, yeah, like there's a clear upgrade there. Whereas with the Nets, it's like your starting point in terms of the rebuild would be Jimmy Butler. Okay, 21 Alex, throw up 2 of your comments. The first one just says Scoot is cheeks.
Aww.
I just thought that was funny. I still think Scoot could be a salvageable NBA player, but
if Chauncey Billups can rehabilitate his career after how it started in Boston, anything's possible.
Yeah. 21 Alex also says, since when do guys don't reword this for you because it's a little.
Yeah, I got it. Since when do guys don't get what they asked for? Harden has to go to LA, but Dame has to go to Miami and gets fined and sent to Milwaukee. Screw you, which is responding to my stuff about how they acted. So here's the only thing is,
oh boy, clear out.
Is you're seeing the power battle kind of play out. You're seeing the power battle play out right now. And this is, I think, a reason why so many of the NBPA guys were very much like, we should not do this deal. This is not a good deal for us. But the players, by and large, because they don't really involve themselves in the union or pay attention to things. And I'm not saying that from like a speculative standpoint. In 2012, after the lockout, there were guys asking questions about the CBA because they had no idea about the thing they had voted to agree to. Like I was in the locker room having this while this conversation is ongoing, and you're just like, oh my God. And like, I would never report who the players were or what those conversations entailed or who the players that didn't know were, because that's not on record, but it is like indicative of like some of this. And the players have spoken honestly about this, about like, there are guys that are really invested and involved in the union, and there's guys that aren't. And that's not uncommon to any union or any workforce. But the point I'm getting to is the owners decided that it had gone too far. And that's a complicated thing to kind of unravel because there's a lot of dynamics that I find problematic in that, where it's like, there's almost a little bit of like, oh man, we believe in you and we love you and we want to empower you as both an athlete and a person. Okay, I want control over my future. Don't love that. Don't see that impacts my money and I like my money. And so now you're in the situation. On the other end of this, though, is like the ridiculousness of the players who are like, I just want to win. Oh, so you want to go to OKC? No, under no circumstances.
Right.
Oh, so you want to go to Memphis because they're like the 3 seed in the West. And you trade for me and it's trouble if I go to Memphis. you want to go to Milwaukee? No, it's cold there. I don't like it there. Where do you want to go? The Lakers. Mm-hmm. Like they all just like pretty much everybody just wants to play for the Lakers. And so you wind up in this situation. But the other thing is just that with Dame, it was like the switch around has just been hilarious because you have the same people that were like, how could Portland do this? Why don't you love Dame? We love Dame. We would do right by Dame. How dare you put your interest as a franchise ahead? Hasn't Dame given you enough? And then now it's, wait, we get what for Jimmy Butler? Screw that. No. Like, and all these type of things. And the people that are still supporting Jimmy, I would just ask you, like, do you like Heat culture? Do you like does the idea of being the hardest working, most accountable team in the NBA sound good to you? Do you buy those t-shirts with that nonsense on it? Because that's the problem here is that Jimmy Butler went to Miami supposedly because he wanted somewhere where that would hold him to account and hold others to account the way that he held people to account in Philadelphia, Minnesota, and Chicago. And it turns out that that's not what happened. He's just a pain in the ass. And that differential is what you're seeing now.
To quote Marlo Stanfield, Jimmy wants it to be one way. Yes. He doesn't like it, that it's the other way. A couple more comments before we get out of here. Let's see. Mark asked if the Suns have any first rounders left. I believe we clarified and said barely.
One?
Barely. You know, like it's, I mean,
I'm in this mock draft. I'm in this mock trade deadline with a bunch of other online basketball folks. And one of the funny things is like I have to approach every conversation because I'm the Nuggets representative. I have to approach every conversation with, I'm giving you my only first rounder I have left to trade. I would give you more. I literally have nothing else you can pull from the marrow of my bones. That's how the Suns are with draft picks as well.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Mark, Suns don't have much to play with, which honestly is another reason why this is so difficult because they blew their draft capital. The majority of it. So not a ton there. Speaking of mock trades, I mean, we kind of laid this out earlier, but Van Lee did ask for a mock Jimmy Butler trade based on intel. I mean, do you want to give it a shot here? You alluded to one earlier. Do you want to just run that one back?
Okay. I will give you 3 of the 4 because I do not know what the last team in this wants.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Butler goes to Phoenix. Bradley Beal goes to another team who drops assets to Chicago. Zach LaVine goes to Milwaukee.
Holy shit.
Milwaukee trades, let's say for now, Chris Middleton and or Brook Lopez and pieces. Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton, both on the table.
Sure.
Those pieces go out. They absorb Zach LaVine. That's as far as I'm willing to go. That's what it looks like. And if you're like, well, who's the team that's going to take Beal? I'm like, that's the thing. Yeah. Like that's, I think, is the question. Chicago doesn't want it because Chicago doesn't want the money. They want to reduce this. They want to reduce salary, not just get out of taxes. Chicago wants to just like not pay money. They want as low a money as possible on what they get in return. But Miami said the same thing. But if you can get various things from Milwaukee, you're getting pieces that are actually might help you. Those two franchises don't exactly have the warmest of buddy relationships, but you deal with who you got to. And I think it's like it's one of those where it's like Miami and Milwaukee can do a deal. They'll both just not enjoy it. Milwaukee and Utah or Miami and Utah are never doing a deal. And that's like never going to happen. That's a different conversation. So that's kind of like the piece that I would say here is like, if you can just find and honestly, that team might be that one, which would be hilarious with all of this. But that Utah might be like that team that's just willing to be like, sure, yeah, well, we'll send him out. Yeah, we've got some contracts. We'll send him out. We'll take Bradley. But then the problem that you run into again is Bradley Beal has to say okay, and he's not going to say okay to Utah. So anyway, what I'm trying to say here is I don't know if I knew the Bradley Beal team, I would report on it because that's major. That's huge news that anyone that is willing to take Bradley that he's willing to go to. But that to me is like how this happens is Jimmy goes to Phoenix and Chicago and Milwaukee are involved. That to me is the most likely outcome. Now, that said, what usually winds up happening is we think like, oh, this is absolutely going to happen. And then it's like, whoa, that's way out of somewhere else.
So. Yeah, there was a reported list out there of Bradley Beal would say yes to like the Lakers, the Heat, a couple other teams. But I mean, we ultimately don't know. And he has to say yes, otherwise it doesn't happen.
He's open to, I've heard he's open to Denver, and I checked in. Oh, boy. And first I got LOL no. And then I got probably not. And I was like, that's a very big difference from, I don't know. But I still think that's unlikely that he winds up there. I do know that Miami, with Jimmy Butler sending him to Denver, was referred to as untenable by a source. So I don't think that's going to happen. But there are my point here is like there are all these pieces I think that could cobble together. The problem is just like when you're talking about a 5-team deal, it's so fragile and anything can fall apart at any time. And it's as simple as like a lot of this is also guys will just blow it up on agents will just blow it up on purpose because it doesn't suit their future needs for other clients. The politics of the NBA is so complicated sometimes, and nobody really knows like how much that stuff goes on behind the scenes. And I don't see the whole board. I see like I'm like outside the door peeking through the keyhole. And even what I see, I'm just like, Jesus, there's a lot that's going on here.
Kyle Metz, Poole to Detroit, ?
I don't think so. I just don't see how there's been a lot of suggestions of the small guards to Detroit. And I'm just like, your point guard's Cade and Ivy is your shooting guard. And Cade's like a small forward. I get it. And you might want to surround him with a shooter, but wouldn't you rather just have Cade at point?
Yes.
Ivy at shooting guard, and then 3 big wings or 2 big wings and Duran. Like, isn't that like, that's how you want to build that roster. So I don't see them taking on the other scoring guards. I just don't. I think that they're in on Ivy. From my understanding is that was one of like the big things with Trajan Langdon's like presentation for taking over the job was like, I believe in Jaden Ivey. We can get the most out of him. JV Bickerstaff is going to do it. We're going to get like, this is going to be one of your guys. And he's been right. So I don't see him. Yeah. I don't see him making a move for a small guard. Now, Kuzma's interesting if they can find someone that wants Tobias, but I don't know that they want to do that anyway. I think they're only moving Tobias if they get like an upgrade.
Jordan Poole, 29.6, 31.8, 34. So not an awesome contract either. For somebody the problem with that also is he's going to need the ball. And you want the ball in Cade Cunningham's hands. Yeah. And you want it more in Jaden Ivey's hands than you want it in Jordan Poole's hands. The Jalen Duren piece is interesting because Pistons fans, the first couple months of the season were like, is he actually going to be a starting center long-term? Like, what is this? He's getting benched here and there. Like, we were seeing some of that, and we'll see where that eventually goes. But I think the Pistons have at least some of their core. And they definitely have a franchise cornerstone, probably 2 with Jaden Ivey, because Jaden Ivey, who actually could come back from injury, by the way, this year, like that's something that the Pistons don't actually have to, hey, we're going to make a move because Jaden Ivey's out. It's like, I mean, you can for the short term, but you don't need Jordan Poole because Jaden Ivey could actually come back in time if you're going to make the playoffs.
Right. And so that actually brings up like a really important point is a lot of these moves are going to be made by teams like Detroit and not just teams like Detroit. But I think I've been advocating that I think Denver needs to make a trade like this is to not just, you need to do a trade that where you're like, we're better now than we were on last week in terms of winning games, play-in, playoff, everything. We're a better team now for this season than we were. We're also in better position to improve the team more this summer than we were. And like, there's no scenario where trading Jaden Ivey does that for you. There's no scenario where adding Jordan Poole does that for you. So that's where I kind of get to is like, I think that Detroit can be very selective and being like opportunistic. And if they do the right things, they have assets to burn and like full stock of everything. They're in a really good position to be able to build around this structure. That's a very good spot for them to be in.
Okay, let's wrap on this. This is actually a question that I have. So thank you, 21 Alex, for the alley-oop. Pat sending Jimmy to Canada like Pop did Kawhi. Can another team actually like it? They're making it seem like, because remember, Jimmy Butler allegedly was saying, "Hey, I want to play anywhere but Miami," and then it quickly became Phoenix or I'll hurt you myself with my bare hands.
Right.
And I'll bite you in the ear, Mike Tyson style / Edgar Berlanga style, because he also did that a few years ago. Idiot. Do we think another team would actually do this, whether or not Jimmy Butler wants it to happen? Because he does not have a no trade clause.
Yeah.
He just has threats, a lot of verbal threats.
I think it's tough. He's done I will say this. I'm impressed with the fact of how he's managed this, because I thought initially I was like, you don't want to go to the mattresses with Pat Riley. And I will say he's done a phenomenal job, because what he did was when he torched Spo, like I was talking to an assistant coach who just said, I couldn't believe it. None of my friends could believe it in the coaching industry. Like, you really, like this guy who's been in his corner, who has backed him, who is one of the classiest dudes, who doesn't brag, who's not arrogant, who comes in, does the work, has worked his way up. That's who you go after. And if you're the rest of the coaches, anyone that's got any sort of ear in the front office and ownership has to be like, no, this guy's going to get me fired. No, I cannot coach this guy.
Right.
He's not what we need. You don't couch it like that. You just say like, he's good, but he's getting older, and I'm just not sure he's what our locker room needs right now. Right.
Sure.
And that's how you phrase it. And because most coaches are political beings as well. The ones that flame out are usually ones that don't get that. Is there a chance? I do think so. Like, I do think that there's an opportunity where one of the things I keep thinking about is, what if somebody just does the deal to get themselves out of the second apron by dumping money? They find somebody to dump the money. And it's hard because of the 100% aggregation, but they find a way to do it. They dump the money, and that gets them into the apron, and then they can maneuver and trade more players. Like, would somebody make that kind of jump? What franchises are like so daring to be willing to take on the risk of Jimmy Butler? And there's very, 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 very few. There's just very few of those. But I do think that like there's a handful. I just can't name them. Like, do I think that's a Laker type move? Absolutely, 100%. If you ask JJ Redick, he'd be like, yeah, I could do it. Jimmy Butler's amazing. He's incredible. We'll make it work. I got LeBron James and Anthony Davis. We'll figure it out.
Would someone trade for him and waive him? Because
yes,
that is a mechanism someone could actually, like a Charlotte who we mentioned earlier, who could be like, yeah, fine, we'll just do it and then get rid of him.
I'm just saying, like, again, I think Chicago would be open to that possibility.
And just buy him out.
Yeah, just buy him out. Just pay the rest of it and be like, vaya con Dios. Jeez. If he's willing to agree to it, right? And then what would be really interesting there is he gets to then choose if he wants to pick up with somebody else that's got the ability to do so, which again they can't do if there's over the second apron. But like any of those first apron teams could go out and just add Jimmy Butler for the playoff run, and be like, you can rehab your value here going into your free agency. Yeah, that'd be very interesting.
Yeah.
And that's where I think of like maybe Toronto. Like that's like a very interesting idea. Is like Toronto is like a very interesting concept. But I think there's probably like a few others that would probably be at least willing to facilitate those kind of ideas. There's just I will say like there's just like a lot of teams that want to get off of money. Like that's the biggest thing at the deadline is they want to get off of money. The problem is like you can't, if all of you want to get off of money, you can't trade with each other because you're all trying to move the same stuff, and it doesn't work. So we'll see what happens.
Right. To put a bow on it, the league is not in peril, but the trade deadline might be. Yeah. That's Matt Moore, Locked On NBA, Locked On Nuggets, Substack, Action Network. We will be on Buckets together Thursday. Once again, as always, it'll record Thursday. It'll be out early Friday. So make sure you check that out. That's on the Action Network sort of podcast network. And thank you for Matt Moore for joining, because we've been trying to set this up. You were on 5 on the Floor. I just want to say, like, I didn't get you because you were coming on 5 on the Floor. This has actually been in the works for a month. It just so happened that on the same day you did 5 on the floor, you also came here. But appreciate it anyway.
I'm very busy. And see, here's the thing though. It's like anytime I get to come on anyone that's Miami adjacent and be like, because of how y'all acted during the Dame thing, I will do it.
The y'all does not apply to me. I'm absolving myself.
You're Heat sympathizer, Bryan Fonseca.
Who also does a Knicks show that will be aired live Thursday. Yes. That's Matt Moore. Thank y'all for joining. A bunch of y'all stayed, commented. We got a lot more comments than I expected, so we ended up going through a bunch of those, so appreciate that. We'll be back with more on the channel very soon. If you're interested in boxing, there is a boxing video up now, and there will be another one up this week, a wish list for 2025, and we'll look at some standouts who may become stars this coming year, just sort of predicting who are going to be the breakout stars in the sport 2025, and some more NBA on the channel. If Jimmy Butler gets traded, we're going to break in and do some sort of immediate emergency live stream. I'll grab somebody from somewhere and we'll just go live, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen in the immediate future.